Hey, welcome back to Become a CSS Superhero with Stylus. This is the last of our lessons on logic and functions, and we're going to wrap up this section with a look at Stylus' own inbuilt functions. Now, you've already created an easy update color scheme utilizing Stylus variables, and you saw how much easier that makes it to update your color scheme. Now, we're going to use Stylus' inbuilt color manipulation functions to make it even easier again. And we already have our highlight color variable in place from the early tutorial. And we are going to take these color manipulation functions to create different versions of that base color. And that will allow us to generate an entire monochromatic color scheme based off this one variable. And we're going to place the different versions of the original highlight color throughout the design to do things like linear gradients and shadows and highlights. All right, let's begin. The first thing I want to do is add a gradient to this little menu button here. Now, as I only have one version of the highlight color so far, I'm going to need a second one. I want a color that's a little bit lighter than the existing highlight color. So I'm going to create a variable called highlight lightened. And then I'm going to take the original highlight color and I'm going to apply a function called lighten to it. So I just type out lighten, open my brackets, place in the original color, and then I'm going to say I want to lighten this color by 15%. Now Stylus will actually take that original highlight color and it will figure out what color is exactly 15% lighter than the original. And so I now have this second variable that I can use to create my linear gradient. Now I'm going to apply that down here, replacing just the flat highlight color that's already in there. All right, now we will change that from background color to just straight background so we can apply a gradient. And we're going to use the linear gradient mix-in from nib, just like we did in an earlier tutorial. So, linear gradient. And in this case, we want it to start at the bottom. The first color will be our existing highlight color. And the second color will be our new highlight lightened color. Let's close the brackets and recompile. And there you go. You can see now that we have a nice subtle gradient effect applied. Okay, next let's apply another gradient, only this time we're going to add one to this hero wrapper with the blue background here. And we're going to do it in such a way that it'll create a kind of a bevel effect. So we want a slightly darker color on one end, then the same flat blue, and a slightly lighter color all the way at the bottom. Now we already have our lightened version of the original blue and our regular original blue. So now we will need a third one that this time has been darkened instead of lightened. So it's the same deal again. In fact, I'm just going to copy and paste this whole line and just change this to highlight darkened and change lighten to darken. And same thing again here with our hero wrap. We're going to use the linear gradient mix-in. Now this time it's going to be a little bit different in terms of the order of colors. Now this time we are going to start with our highlight lightened color, and that will be at 0%. Then we'll move on to our regular highlight color. And we're going to place that at 2%. So it just creates a little bit of a light effect, as in a lighting effect at the bottom of the hero element. Then we will pick up the main highlight color all the way up at 98% again. And we will wrap up with our new highlight darkened color. Now you can see the effect that's been created. It's just subtle, but that's generally speaking what you want with a lighting effect. Just nice and subtle. So you've got a little shadow at the top here, and a little bit of a light effect at the bottom. And to keep this consistent, we don't want this actual slide area to look flat anymore. This blue background has been given the effect of being sunk back, so we want this photo to be given the look of having been set forward in the page, and we'll do that by adding a box shadow to it. And we already have our highlight darken variable, so we can just go ahead and use that existing darker version of the blue for the drop shadow here. Now I'm just going to copy and paste some code over to show you the effect. So we just have a box shadow mix in with the size and the blur amount of the shadow, and we're just using our same highlight darken variable. And there you can see again, subtle still, but you can see the shadow effect. Just let me blow this up to full screen so you can also see around the edges we have this shadow. Next, we're going to just add in some really subtle borders, just some very fine lines. We're going to go with a soft, subtle line along the bottom of this strip here, as well as down the sides of this content area. And to do that, we're going to need one more color. And we're going to call it highlight grade. To create this color, we're going to combine two different functions. We're going to apply two different functions to the same original highlight blue. Okay, so add in our equals sign. And first, we're going to desaturate the original blue. Desaturate. Highlight color. And we're going to desaturate it by 70%. And to desaturate basically means you're making something grayscale. And the more you desaturate it, the closer it gets to just straight black and white. The higher the saturation is, the further away from straight black and white it is. And then we're also going to lighten it a little bit as well. So again, just use that lighten function. And then put a comma after what you've already written. And add 50%. Now we're going to use this highlight grade variable down on our middle wrap class. I'm just going to add a border to the bottom. Border bottom, 1 flexible pixel, solid, highlight grade. And save that out. And there you go. You can see it's appeared at the bottom of this middle area. And then we're going to do the same thing down the sides of the content area. And we'll just add in both a left border and a right border using that same highlight grade variable. And you can now see that same color running down the sides of this space. Next, we want to add in some hover effects. Right now, when you hover over the read more link or just regular links, the color doesn't change. So we want to add in something to let people know that they can interact. And we're going to do that by creating another color variable. And this time, we'll call it highlight hover. And just a quick tip. When you're creating your variable names, don't use names like red or blue or green, because it kind of defeats the purpose of having a variable that you can change. If you decide that you don't want a blue color scheme anymore, you're going to be stuck trying to make sense of a style sheet that's full of variable called blue this or green that. Instead, try to make your variable names represent the function of the color. So in this case, we are using this variable wherever there's a hover. Now, it doesn't matter if it's pink, purple, green, red, that variable is still going to make sense. All right, now we're going to take one of the colors that we've already created and adjust it a little bit further. In this case, we're going to saturate it. And you remember what I said earlier, this means that you're taking it further away from being just grayscale, you're filling it up with color. I'm going to take our highlight lightened color and we are going to saturate it by 40%. And now we'll take that down and apply it to our read more color. You'll remember from an earlier video that you can target pseudo classes in this way. And the focus. And then we'll set our background color to our new highlight hover. And we're also going to apply this to our regular links. So we'll have it that our default color for our normal links inside the content is just our pre-existing highlight color. But when it's hovered, you get the hover color. Okay, so now, there we go. Nice bright blue for the hover effect. And finally, just one more little tweak. Right now, we've got some fairly bright white color down on the footer here. And we want to make that just a little bit more subdued. So we'll go ahead and create our last variable. And we're going to call it highlight text over, because this is the color that we'll use on any text that is over our highlight color. And again, we're going to take one of the existing modified colors that we already created, and we will lighten it. So we're lightening our highlight hover color by 40% to give us our highlight text over color. And now we'll replace that white with our new variable. And now you can see that you've got a much more subtle text color for the footer. Let's have a look at this full screen. Now these are the little details that will help to give your designs life. Now when this gets really cool, yes, it's cool that you can just take your existing colors and you can create different versions of them without having to go into a graphics application. That by itself is really cool. But what's even better is now all of these colors, all of these variations, this whole monochromatic color scheme can be changed purely by altering this base variable. So watch this. Let's say we want to go with red instead. Save and compile. Now check that out. How cool is that? Let's make this full screen. Now everything has been adjusted. You've got gradients. You've got shadows. You've got your borders. You've got your highlight colors and your footer text color. Everything has been changed just by changing that one single variable. Now, if you can get into the habit of doing all your color schemes like this, then imagine how much time you'll save if you need to make a color scheme wide adjustment. It's just fantastic. You can see why stylus functions and all of these different things that we've been going through are so powerful. And they can give you access to all of these different ways of making your workflow more efficient and allowing you to create more different versions and more variations on your work. There are also some other functions that are built into Stylus, and I'll include a link to the reference where you can have a look at all the different functions that are available for you. And that wraps up our practical intro to logic and functions. In the next section, the last of the course, we're going to go into Stylus superpowers. So these are a little bit more difficult, but really not very difficult. These are the areas where you can start to get into some of the super special features of Stylus. Everything else has already been pretty superpowered so far, but in this last section, we're going to tackle some really, really good stuff. So I'll see you in Stylus Superpowers.